Fired and Avenged. Part 1. I still remember the way he looked at me like I was nothing. Just another expendable cog in his grand machine, someone to be tossed aside without a second thought. He didn't know me. He didn't know what I did. And he certainly didn't know what was coming next. It all started on a Monday morning. The office buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone had heard the rumors. Corporate was sending in a new regional manager, and from what little information had trickled down to us, he was a real piece of work. Ruthless. The kind of guy who made cuts first and asked questions never. I had been with the company for 7 years. Started from the bottom, climbed my way up, and eventually I became the glue that held everything together. I didn't have a fancy title, but I knew how everything ran. Every system, every client, every process. If someone had a question, they came to me. Something went wrong, I was the one who fixed it. But my official title? Operations Coordinator. Nothing flashy, nothing impressive, just enough to make me invisible to someone like him. At precisely 8:45 a.m. he walked in. Matthew Grayson. The moment he stepped into the office, the atmosphere changed. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. He was tall, sharp-featured, and dressed like he had something to prove. "Good morning," he said in a voice so devoid of warmth it might as well have been an automated message. "Let's get one thing straight. I'm here to clean up inefficiencies. If you're not adding value, you're out." Just like that. No introduction. No getting to know the team. Just a thinly veiled threat wrapped in a designer suit. We had a brief, mandatory meeting where he threw around corporate buzzwords like streamlining and maximizing productivity without any real substance. Then, before lunch, he started calling people into his office one by one. People left looking shaken. 2 walked out with their things in boxes. At 2 p.m. it was my turn. I walked in, sat down, and met his gaze head-on. He flipped through a folder without looking up. "Your role," he said, "Operations Coordinator. Vague. Unclear. I don't see direct revenue generation attached to your name. What exactly do you do here?" I raised an eyebrow. "I keep this place running." His lip curled like he didn't believe me. I looked at the payroll reports. "You're one of the highest paid non-executives here." "Why?" "Because I've earned it," I said simply. "Ask anyone." "I don't have time to ask anyone," he snapped, slamming the folder shut. "I make decisions based on numbers, and numbers tell me you're an unnecessary expense." There was. Cold, clinical, and stupid. "You're firing me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I'm letting you go," he corrected. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. No severance." He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. To him, I was just a line item to be erased. But he had no idea what he had just done. As I walked out past my stunned colleagues, an idea started forming in my mind. He thought he had gotten rid of an expense? Well, he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. And I was going to make sure he regretted it. Part 2. By the time I stepped outside, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by a slow-burning fury. 7 years. 7 damn years of dedication, of late nights, of fixing disasters no one else even knew about. And just like that, I was discarded, without a thank you, without severance, without so much as a second glance. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "Right," I thought. "You want to play dirty? Let's play." The first thing I did was pull out my phone and call Monica, my closest friend at the company. She answered on the first ring. "Holy crap," she whispered. "Are you okay? What just happened?" I took a deep breath. "I need you to do something for me. Keep an eye on everything. Tell me what changes. Who he fires. What he messes up." "You got it," she said without hesitation. "But, what are you planning?" "Something he'll never see coming." That night I didn't cry. I didn't wallow. I had to work. I spent the next few days pulling every piece of leverage I had. I still had access to a few external systems. Grayson had been too short-sighted to revoke all my credentials immediately. I dug through emails, reports, project plans. And then I found it. The Achilles heel. Our biggest client, the one that made up nearly 40% of the company's revenue, had a renewal contract coming up in 3 weeks. I had personally managed that account for years. I knew their needs, their quirks, their expectations. And I also knew that if anything even slightly smelled like instability, they'd walk. Grayson had just introduced a whole lot of instability. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Tom? It's me. Tom Reynolds, the senior VP of our biggest client, sounded surprised but pleased. Hey. How's it going? Not great, I admitted. I wanted to give you a heads up about some major internal changes. Changes that might affect your account. There was a pause. Then, tell me everything. I plan to. Part 3. Tom listened carefully as I laid out the details. I kept it professional. No personal vendetta, just facts. I told him about the sudden terminations, the chaos unfolding behind the scenes, and how Grayson's reckless decisions were putting everything at risk. Tom exhaled sharply. This is concerning. We signed on because of stability. You know how high stakes our operations are. If there's even a hint of mismanagement, we can't afford to take that risk. Exactly what I wanted to hear. I'm not saying pull the contract, I said smoothly. Not yet. But maybe hold off on signing that renewal until you get some reassurances. Ask for meetings. Demand updates. See how they handle the pressure. Tom chuckled. You're devious. I like it. I just want what's best for everyone, I said innocently. Except Grayson. Tom laughed outright at that. I'll make some calls. By the end of the week, Grayson was about to walk into a minefield. And I couldn't wait to watch him step on it. Part 4. By the end of the following week, Grayson had started feeling the heat. Our biggest client, Tom Reynolds' company, had been dragging its feet on the renewal, asking for more meetings, more updates, more reassurances. Each time they requested an update, I made sure it was something that painted a picture of chaos within the company. New policies. High turnover. Uncertainty across the board. Grayson's initial response? To double down. He tried pushing forward, calling it necessary growth and streamlining, but even his bravado couldn't mask the cracks forming under pressure. By the time Monday rolled around, the clients had formally suspended discussions about the contract renewal, citing the instability and structural concerns we had alerted them to. It wasn't long before I started hearing whispers in the office. The word around the water cooler was that Grayson's position was starting to look shaky. The company was in talks to hire a consultant to help get things back on track. It was just the beginning. Grayson, of course, had no idea that I was the one behind it all. He still thought I was just some fired employee with no power. What he didn't know was that I was pulling strings from the shadows. One day, as I was about to head to the gym, I received a text from Monica. He's talking about making more cuts. He's starting with your department. Wants to axe the entire operations team. I smiled. This was it. Grayson was about to face the consequences of his arrogance. I took a deep breath. It was time for the next phase of my plan. Part 5. I spent the rest of the day crafting a detailed email to upper management, outlining the risks of cutting the operations department entirely. I used every piece of data I had accumulated over the years. The sheer number of client relationships that had been built through the operations team, the deep institutional knowledge they held, and the potential costs of throwing all of that away. I also made sure to subtly hint at the fact that Grayson's short-sighted decisions had already started costing the company, including the client losses I had helped engineer. I made sure that email would land in the right inboxes. The next morning my phone buzzed. It was Monica again. He's freaking out, she said. Everyone knows about the email. He's losing it. There's a meeting this afternoon to discuss the future of the operations team. I couldn't help but grin. Grayson was cornered, and he had no idea who had been pulling the strings all along. This was about to get even better. Part 6. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m., and I could feel the tension building from the moment I walked into the coffee shop across the street from the office. I wasn't there physically, but I could sense everything happening inside that conference room. Monica had kept me updated on the chaos over the last few days. Grayson's attempts to defend himself were growing more frantic, more desperate. And now the moment of truth was upon him. I tapped my fingers on the table, watching the seconds tick by on my phone. This was it. The final act in my little drama. Monica texted me just as I was about to take a sip of my coffee. He's going down. The execs are grilling him. They're questioning every decision he's made. People are talking about layoffs and restructuring, but they can't ignore the mess he's created. I smiled to myself. It was finally happening. By the time I walked into the office the next morning, I could feel the shift in the air. The usual hum of activity was now replaced with whispers, worried glances, and a general sense of unease. Even the janitor, who had never cared about the politics of the place, was looking around as if he knew something big was coming. I walked straight to Monica's desk. "He's done, isn't he?" I asked, my voice low but filled with certainty. Monica looked up at me, a knowing glint in her eye. "Yeah. The board has already started talking about pulling him out. They're bringing in a consultant to fix the mess, which, let's be honest, was mostly created by him." I leaned in, feeling a rush of satisfaction. "And what about the operations department?" "That's the funny part," she said, chuckling under her breath. "He tried to axe the whole team. But after everything that's happened, people are finally starting to realize how important you were. They're fighting for the department. They're fighting for you." I couldn't help but laugh. After everything Grayson had done, he was the one who had created the situation that might actually save the department I had built. But I wasn't done yet. As the day went on, the phone calls kept coming. From headhunters. From people within the company who were starting to realize the truth. I didn't need a job. Not right now. But the thought of how Grayson would squirm when he realized what I was doing next, it was almost too good to pass up. Part 7. The clock ticked on as I waited, a slight smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Grayson had no idea what was coming. My plan was nearly complete, and now it was all about timing. The final piece of the puzzle was in motion. I was about to deliver the knockout punch, the one that would send Grayson scrambling, but in a way he'd never see coming. Monica had texted me, "The meeting's going down. The execs are getting ready to confront him. It's about to explode." The messages kept rolling in. Everyone's talking about how the operations team is essential. They want to fight for you. They want to keep everything you built. I hadn't even told her the extent of my plan, but now it was clear. People were realizing that Grayson's decisions were a ticking time bomb. And I was the one who had set it off. I sat back in my chair, my mind focused on the next step. The board had already started asking questions, questioning his decisions, and that's when it hit me. If I played my cards right, I could turn this around completely. Grayson would be out and I could take over, at least part of it. A part of me had always wanted to run things differently, to show them that there was a better way to manage this business. Grayson's brutal, dismissive approach wasn't the way to do it. I was the one who knew how everything worked behind the scenes, and now I was going to prove it. I sat on that thought for another few minutes. It was time. The meeting was about to end and the fallout was coming. If everything went as planned, Grayson would be out within hours. But just as I was about to take a breath and prepare myself for the final blow, my phone buzzed. Monica had sent me a screenshot of an email. The subject line read, "Urgent. Board decision on Grayson's future." I leaned in and read through it quickly. The board had decided to act, but instead of firing him immediately, they were putting him under probation and asking for a full review of his actions. This was bad. It meant Grayson would have more time to fight back, to reorganize, and potentially get out of this mess. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was still my opportunity. The board didn't just want to fire him. They wanted someone to lead them through this crisis. Someone who could stabilize the company and restore its faith in operations. That someone? Me. Part 8. The weight of the new information hit me like a freight train. Grayson wasn't out yet. That was a problem. But it was also an opportunity. A golden one. The board was hesitant, unsure of who could step in and fix the mess Grayson had created. And there I was, sitting on the edge of their failure, watching them flounder. I took a deep breath. I needed to act fast but carefully. The board would only go so far in their current state. They would be looking for someone to restore order, someone with deep knowledge of the company and its inner workings, someone who could stabilize things before Grayson's mess took down the entire operation. And that someone, as I had already calculated, was me. I texted Monica, "I need all the intel you can get on the board members. The ones on Grayson's side. The ones who are skeptical. Any weak links, any skeletons in their closets. Everything." She replied immediately, "You got it. Let's make this count." I could feel the shift in power already. The board was on edge. Grayson was scrambling to salvage his position, while I, the one he had discarded so easily, was plotting my move. I didn't waste any time. The next few hours were spent researching, contacting former colleagues, and piecing together a strategy that would bring Grayson to his knees. But I also needed to move quickly. The board was going to meet again in the morning. I had to be ready. I started drafting an email to one of the senior executives who had been speaking out against Grayson. I had worked with him in the past and I knew he was skeptical of the new manager's tactics. It wouldn't hurt to reach out, plant a few seeds and let him know that there was someone else who could fix things. Someone who knew the company better than anyone. The email was short, direct, and to the point. Subject: Strategic opportunity. Hi. I've been reviewing the current state of the company and I wanted to share some thoughts. As you know, there are a few cracks starting to show in the management structure, and it's clear that things could be heading toward a crisis. However, I believe we can stabilize things quickly and effectively. If you're interested in a more in-depth discussion, I'd be happy to meet. I think there's an opportunity here that could benefit both the company and its employees. Best regards. I hit send and sat back in my chair, fingers tingling with anticipation. This wasn't just about making sure Grayson failed. It was about positioning myself to take his place. Or, at the very least, ensure that the company wasn't run into the ground by his incompetence. Hours passed and I could feel the tension building. I could almost hear the whispers in the hallways, the uncertainty and frustration growing louder. I had given them a glimpse of an alternative and now I had to deliver. The next morning Monica's message came through. They're pulling Grayson into another meeting. Board's turning on him. They want to know who can take over. My heart skipped a beat. It was happening. Everything I had worked for, every move I had planned was falling into place. Grayson was on the brink, and I was the one holding the key to the next chapter of the company's fate. Part 9. The morning of the board meeting arrived with an almost electric tension in the air. I had no idea how things would play out, but I knew one thing. This was my moment. Grayson was on the ropes and the board was wavering. They were looking for someone to step in, someone with a plan. Someone who could right the ship before it sank. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for any word from Monica. Finally, it came. The meeting's happening now. Grayson's sweating. They're asking about his decisions and it's not looking good. I've also heard some whispers about you. Some of the higher-ups are interested. They want to know more about your approach. This is your chance. I felt my pulse quicken. The opportunity was now. I had everything I needed. Monica had been gathering intel. The board was starting to see Grayson's incompetence for what it was, and I had already positioned myself as a viable alternative. I just needed to close the deal. I quickly shot off a text to my old colleague, the one I had sent the email to the night before. The response came almost instantly. It Subject: Strategic opportunity. Hi. I'd like to meet. Can we connect at 2 p.m. today? I think there's a lot more to discuss. Best regards. It was time. I quickly ran through my strategy in my mind. I had to keep the conversation focused on my experience, on the knowledge that Grayson had so blatantly overlooked. I needed to make them see that I was the one who could stabilize the company, who understood the inner workings that Grayson had dismissed as insignificant. I arrived at the executive's office at exactly 2 p.m. His assistant let me in and I sat across from him, the tension palpable in the room. He looked at me with a mix of curiosity and guarded optimism. So, Emma, he began, I've been hearing some interesting things. The board's not happy with Grayson's leadership, and from what I've gathered, you've been behind some of the company's most important projects. Tell me more. I leaned forward, my voice calm and measured. I've been with this company for over 7 years. I know its strengths, its weaknesses, and its people. More importantly, I know how to make things run smoothly even when everything seems to be falling apart. That's why I've been able to maintain long-term relationships with our clients, even when the rest of the company was struggling to keep up. I can offer that stability. He nodded, clearly impressed. That's exactly what we need right now. Stability. But we also need someone who can lead, not just manage. Can you do that? I smiled just a little. I don't just manage. I lead. Always have. I've been the one fixing things behind the scenes, making sure everything functions. I understand the pressures and demands of this business better than anyone. I'm not just a problem solver. I'm a solution provider. He stared at me for a moment, clearly weighing the options. Finally he spoke. I think the board is looking for someone like you. Grayson's days are numbered. But you'll need more than just my support. You'll need the support of the entire board. Then let's make sure they see what I can do, I replied, my confidence unwavering. As I left the meeting, I couldn't help but feel the excitement rising in my chest. The pieces were falling into place. The board would soon see the truth. I was the one who could save this company, and I was more than ready to step up. Part 10. The next few days felt like a blur. Grayson was no longer just a figurehead in the company, he was a liability. The board meeting I had sat through was only the beginning. The higher-ups were now starting to talk openly about the company's future and the glaring holes in its operations. Grayson's mistakes were piling up faster than he could cover them, and my name was floating around more and more as a potential solution. Monica kept feeding me intel from the inside. The atmosphere in the office had shifted. People who had been silent for months now murmured among themselves, exchanging looks of disbelief as Grayson stumbled from one misstep to another. Employees who had been on the edge of quitting suddenly felt emboldened, whispering about their confidence in my leadership. But I wasn't resting on my laurels. I knew the game was far from over. The next step would be crucial, securing the board's support without looking like I was gloating or taking advantage of Grayson's downfall. I needed to prove that I wasn't just a replacement for Grayson, but someone who could guide the company to a better place. That afternoon, I received a call from David Michaels. His tone was businesslike, but there was an undertone of urgency that caught my attention. "Are you available to meet tomorrow?" he asked. "The board wants to talk to you. It's not official, but it could be a good opportunity to get a feel for where things stand." I immediately agreed. The longer I waited, the more control I lost over the narrative. It was time to make my move. The next morning, I arrived at the building with a mixture of excitement and caution. I had no idea what to expect from this meeting, but one thing was certain. I had to be ready for anything. I was walking into a room full of people who had been part of a system that allowed Grayson's reign to continue. They had all been complicit in his rise, and now they had to decide whether I was their savior or just another pawn in a corporate game. David was waiting for me in the conference room. When I walked in, he gave me a reassuring smile, though his eyes were filled with a hint of concern. I wasn't sure if that was because of the gravity of the situation or if he genuinely feared for my ability to pull this off. Either way, I didn't let it show. The meeting began with small talk, nothing too serious, but I could feel the tension building. Eventually, the topic shifted to the company's future, and Grayson's leadership or lack thereof. The board was starting to recognize that there were deep-rooted issues, but they didn't have a clear direction on how to move forward. Emma, one of the board members, Amanda Ruiz, said, "We've heard a lot of praise for your efforts and leadership potential. Tell us why you think you can take the reins and guide this company to stability." I took a deep breath, my mind racing with thoughts. This was it. I had to sell myself without sounding desperate, confident without being arrogant. "I've spent the past 7 years here learning every aspect of this company from the inside out," I began. "I've worked with every department, collaborated with every team, and formed lasting relationships with our clients. I understand the struggles that we've faced. But more importantly, I know how to fix them. My approach isn't about sweeping changes that will rock the boat. It's about stabilizing what we have and building on it, creating an environment where both employees and clients feel valued." I paused, letting the words sink in. A company is only as strong as its people. Right now we've lost trust. We need to rebuild that trust from the ground up. But we also need to act swiftly and decisively to stabilize our key accounts and secure our market position. And I'm confident I'm the right person to do that. I've seen it all here. I know what needs to be done, and I'm ready to lead. There was a long silence after my speech. I could tell they were all processing it, weighing my words carefully. But as the silence stretched on, I felt a wave of confidence wash over me. I had made my case. I had shown them that I wasn't just some backup option or filler. I was the solution they needed. Finally, David Michaels spoke up. "We'll need to discuss this further, but I think you've made a strong case. Thank you for your time." As I stood up to leave, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. The ball was now in their court. All I had to do was wait. Part 11. The days following my meeting with the board felt like an eternity. I knew the ball was in their court, but the silence was maddening. Grayson, meanwhile, continued to make his misguided decisions, but I could sense that his confidence was starting to crack. The cracks were subtle, an offhand remark here, a missed deadline there, but they were enough to destabilize the tenuous structure he had tried to build. Monica kept me updated on the latest happenings in the office. It was becoming more and more obvious that Grayson's inability to communicate and motivate his team was wreaking havoc. People were starting to leave, some voluntarily, some by force. It was a sinking ship and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, I did my best to stay focused. I kept reaching out to old contacts and building my network, preparing for whatever opportunity the board might offer. Or, if they didn't, preparing for my own strategy. I wasn't about to wait around forever. Then the call came. It was David Michaels, and his voice was calm but decisive. "Emma, the board wants to move forward with you. They've seen enough, and they're ready to offer you the position of interim regional manager. It's yours, effective immediately." I felt a rush of adrenaline surge through my body. It wasn't the full-time, permanent position I was aiming for, but it was a start. I had made it through the door. The board was clearly buying what I was selling, and now it was time to prove myself. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice steady but filled with gratitude. "I won't let them down." I hung up, a mixture of excitement and nerves swirling inside me. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The next day I walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Grayson was already at his desk, looking a little more disheveled than usual. His eyes flicked toward me as I walked past, but there was no acknowledgement. I knew he had to be aware that the tides were turning, but he wasn't the type to admit weakness. He would continue to put on his facade until the very end. I made my way to my new office, a sleek corner suite that overlooked the entire building. For the first time in years, I sat behind a desk that felt truly mine. This was my space now. And the company's fate was in my hands. The next few hours were a blur of meetings, introductions, and strategy sessions. I took my time listening more than talking, taking stock of the key players, and understanding where the real challenges lay. Grayson's legacy was a mess, but I knew exactly how to clean it up. By the end of the day, I had already drafted a plan. A roadmap to regain the trust of our employees and clients. I would start with the people who had been loyal to the company all along. They were the ones who had been left in the dark, neglected by Grayson's reign of terror. They were the ones I needed to win over first. As the evening wore on, I received another message from Monica. Text from Monica. "Grayson's flipping out. He hasn't said it directly, but everyone knows he's losing it. He's trying to make himself look like the victim, but it's not working. The team's already started to look at you differently. They're paying attention. You got this, Emma." I couldn't help but smile at the message. Monica's support meant the world to me. She had been there through everything. My late nights at the office, my endless brainstorming sessions, and now as I prepared to take control, she was still by my side. I had made it this far. I wasn't about to let anything, or anyone, get in my way. Not Grayson, not the board, and certainly not the challenges ahead. This was my time. And it had only just begun. Part 12. The next few days were a whirlwind. I'd barely finished mapping out my strategy before the calls started coming in. Grayson was scrambling, trying to meet with anyone who would listen to him, trying to defend his actions, trying to maintain some semblance of control over the chaos he had unleashed. But it was too late. His credibility had evaporated. The board had already made their decision, and now it was up to me to step in and clean up the mess. I spent the first few days listening to employees, listening to clients, listening to the key stakeholders whose trust had been shaken over the past few months. Everyone had a story, everyone had a grievance, and I needed to understand each of them if I was going to make this work. The office was quieter than usual. People whispered behind their desks, exchanging glances as I walked by. Some faces showed relief, others uncertainty, but there was an undercurrent of something more powerful. Hope. Hope that things might actually improve under new leadership. That gave me the motivation I needed to keep pushing forward. I held my first team meeting the next morning. Every head in the room turned to me as I stepped up to the front of the conference room. The weight of their expectations hung heavily in the air. These were people who had seen everything fall apart, people who had been burned by the previous regime. They needed to know I could lead them through this, not just talk about it. "Good morning, everyone," I began, trying to sound calm, even though my nerves were bubbling just beneath the surface. I know that things have been difficult lately. You've been through a lot, and I want you to know that I see that. I'm not here to tell you that everything will be fixed overnight. What I am here to do is offer a plan, a strategy, and a commitment to rebuild this company from the ground up, together. I paused, scanning the faces in the room. They were watching me closely now, waiting for the next words to come. I had their attention. That was a good start. We will rebuild trust, both internally and externally. I know that trust is earned, and I'm prepared to do the work. We'll start by focusing on our people, investing in your growth, your satisfaction, and your well-being. No more micromanaging. I want everyone to have a seat at the table. Your input matters. I took another breath, making sure I had their full attention. Next, we're going to re-engage with our clients. I'll be personally meeting with all of our key accounts to ensure they know that we're here to stay and that we're making changes that matter. And we'll make sure that our internal processes are streamlined and effective, so we can deliver the quality of service they expect. I watched as some of them nodded. A few exchanged glances. For the first time in a long time, the team was starting to believe. I don't expect immediate results, I continued, but I do expect everyone to put in the effort. This is a team effort. No one is exempt. If we're going to make this work, we all need to be on the same page. There was a brief silence as I finished speaking, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what would come next. But then slowly people began to clap. It was tentative at first, but the energy in the room grew and the clapping grew louder. A wave of relief seemed to sweep over the team. They were on board. I didn't waste any time after the meeting. I immediately scheduled one-on-ones with department heads to discuss their challenges and needs. I had to get to the root of everything, every issue, every problem, every bottleneck that had been holding the company back. The more I listened, the more I realized just how bad things had gotten under Grayson. The morale was low, the communication was non-existent, and the systems that had once worked efficiently were now in disarray. But despite all of that, there was a fierce determination among the team to turn things around. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But with each passing day, I felt more and more confident that I could lead the company back to its feet. That night, I stayed late in my office, reviewing financials and project timelines. I wanted to make sure I knew every detail so nothing could catch me off guard. The next day, I had a meeting with Tom Reynolds, our largest client. I had already reached out to him to schedule a lunch, hoping to reassure him that the company was in good hands. As I walked into the restaurant, I spotted Tom immediately. He looked up as I approached, his eyes sharp and calculating. I extended my hand and gave him a confident smile. "Tom, it's good to see you. Thanks for meeting me." He shook my hand but didn't smile. "Emma, I'll be honest. I wasn't sure what to expect when I heard about Grayson. I'm sure you understand why I'm cautious." "I do," I said, taking a seat across from him. "And I don't expect you to take my word for it. What I can tell you is that I'm committed to ensuring we get things right. I know how important this partnership is, and I'll do whatever it takes to regain your trust." Tom studied me for a long moment before he spoke. "I've been in this business long enough to know that words are easy. Let's see some action, Emma. I'll give you a chance, but I'll be watching closely." I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. I wouldn't have it any other way. Part 13. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and strategy sessions. I barely had time to breathe, but I welcomed the chaos. I knew it would take all my energy and focus to get the company back on track, and I was more than willing to give it my all. Every decision I made, every move I took was calculated to show both the team and our clients that I was serious about turning things around. The meeting with Tom Reynolds had gone as well as I could have hoped. We discussed the immediate changes I was implementing, and while he wasn't ready to fully trust me just yet, he seemed willing to give me the benefit of the doubt. That was something at least. I spent the next few days meeting with other clients, putting out fires and cleaning up the mess Grayson had left behind. Slowly but surely, I started to see the first signs of change. Morale was improving. People were more engaged, and the team was starting to function like a well-oiled machine again. But as the days went on, I started to notice something else. Something I hadn't expected. Grayson was still around. He wasn't officially in the office anymore, but he was making his presence known in subtle ways. I'd hear rumors from Monica about him sending emails to employees, trying to gather support from the remnants of his former team. There were whispers that he was planning something, that he was determined to make a comeback. I didn't take it lightly. Grayson was dangerous and I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. He'd already shown how ruthless he could be, and I had no doubt he was plotting his next move. But I wasn't afraid. If anything, I was more determined than ever to prove that I was the one who deserved to lead this company. The breaking point came one afternoon when I received an email from David Michaels. Email from David Michaels. I've just received word that Grayson is trying to take legal action to regain his position. He's claiming that his termination was unfair and that he was pushed out without proper due process. It's still in the early stages, but I wanted you to be aware of it. We need to prepare for the possibility that this could get messy. David. I stared at the email, my heart pounding in my chest. Grayson was making a move. This was exactly what I had feared. He wasn't going to let this go without a fight, and now I had to be ready for whatever he threw at me. I immediately called Monica. Grayson's making a move, I told her. He's threatening legal action. There was a pause on the other end. That's insane. He's got nothing on you, right? I don't know, I said, rubbing my temples. But we can't take this lightly. He's dangerous. He's already shown he's willing to do anything to get back into power. We need to get ahead of this, Monica said firmly. I'll start gathering all the documentation on his termination. We'll make sure we've got everything covered. Good, I replied, my mind already racing. I'll call David and see what we need to do from our end. I called David Michaels right away. He sounded calm but concerned as always. Emma, we're going to need to take this seriously, he said. I've spoken to our legal team and they're going to start gathering the necessary paperwork. Grayson's not going to make this easy. But we'll fight it. You've got our support. I thanked him and hung up, my mind already working on the next steps. This was far from over and I wasn't about to let Grayson win. If he thought he could come back and take what was rightfully mine, he was in for a rude awakening. The next few days were tense. I stayed in constant communication with both David and Monica, gathering information and preparing for the legal battle that loomed on the horizon. Grayson had made his move, but I was ready to counter it. Then one morning I walked into the office to find a message from Tom Reynolds waiting for me. Email from Tom Reynolds. Emma. I just wanted to let you know that I've been following everything that's been happening, and I want you to know that we're still fully committed to this partnership. I've heard the rumors about Grayson and I want you to know that you have our full support. If there's anything I can do to help or any way we can assist in making sure the transition goes smoothly, don't hesitate to ask. Tom. I read the message 3 times, letting the weight of his words sink in. Tom's support was invaluable. With him behind me, I knew I had one less thing to worry about. I wasn't just fighting for my position, I was fighting for the entire company, for everyone who had stuck with it through the tough times. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of it all. This was my fight. And I wasn't backing down. Part 14. The days that followed felt like a slow-motion blur. Grayson's legal threat hung over me like a dark cloud, but I didn't let it break my focus. I had a company to run and there were more important things at stake than his petty power grab. He was a distraction and I couldn't afford to be distracted. In the office I kept the momentum going. The team was stronger than ever and it felt like we were all working in sync again. There was a renewed energy in the air. People were excited to show that they could thrive without the looming threat of Grayson's micromanagement. We were rebuilding not just the company, but the trust that had been shattered by his incompetence. But every night I found myself staring at the emails from David and Monica, poring over legal documents, making sure we had every angle covered. I couldn't afford to take this lightly. Grayson was not just a disgruntled ex-employee. He was a man who had proven that he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I knew he'd fight dirty. One evening as I was reviewing some financial reports, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Monica. Message from Monica. Emma, I found something. I'm not sure if this is related, but I thought you should know. Grayson's been meeting with some of the old investors. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I have a bad feeling about it. My heart skipped a beat as I read the message. Grayson was making moves behind the scenes. I knew he'd been making calls to old colleagues and trying to rally support, but this was different. Investors were a different beast. If Grayson could convince just 1 or 2 of them to back him, he could gain the leverage he needed to challenge my position. I couldn't let that happen. I immediately dialed her number. Monica, what do you know? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I don't have all the details yet, she said, her tone tense. But I've seen some emails and he's definitely been working the back channels. He's talking to people who are unhappy with the direction you're taking. I think he's trying to convince them that he'd be a better fit for the company. I could hear the frustration in her voice. She was loyal to me, but I knew she was worried. Do you think this is going to escalate? I do, she replied. He's got connections. If we don't do something, he could make this much worse. I let out a long breath, my mind racing. Thanks for letting me know, Monica. I'll figure out what to do. After hanging up, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grayson's next move was coming, and it was going to hit hard. But I had a secret weapon, Tom Reynolds. The next morning I called him again. Tom and I had developed a strong professional relationship since I'd taken over, and I knew he could help me navigate this next phase. His influence could be crucial in countering Grayson's moves. Tom, I said as soon as he picked up, I need your help. I've got a feeling Grayson is trying to rally investors against me. I don't know if it's true yet, but if it is, we need to act fast. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, then he spoke. I'll make some calls, Emma. You don't have to worry about it. We're committed to you and I'll make sure the others are too. Don't let him get in your head. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Tom's confidence was exactly what I needed. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about proving that I had the support of people who believed in me. People who saw potential in my leadership. And with Tom's help, I was more determined than ever to shut Grayson down once and for all. A few days later I got the call I'd been waiting for. It was from David Michaels. Emma, he said, his voice serious, we've been reviewing the legal situation and I've spoken to our attorneys. They believe we have a strong case. But we need to act fast. Grayson's team is pushing hard, and they've already filed a preliminary injunction. He's trying to freeze everything, your position, the company's assets, everything. I stood up, pacing in my office. What do we do next? We need to prepare for court, David said. But we're going to need all the documents we've gathered, all the communications. Everything. Grayson's lawyers will try to twist the narrative, and we need to be ready to counter it. I nodded, my jaw clenched. This wasn't just a corporate battle anymore. This was a fight for my career, my future, and the future of the company. I wasn't going to let Grayson win. We'll be ready, I said, my voice steady despite the pressure mounting inside me. I'll make sure everything is in order. We're not going down without a fight. As the days went on, the legal battle intensified. Grayson's team was relentless, but so were we. We had the facts on our side, and I was determined to make sure that Grayson would never get another chance to undermine everything I had worked for. And when the court date finally arrived, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Part 15. The courtroom was cold and sterile, the kind of place where the air felt thick with tension. I sat at the table with David Michaels, my attorney, while Grayson and his team of lawyers stood across from us. There was no question in my mind that he was doing everything in his power to win this. He wanted to take back control, to reclaim his position no matter the cost. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Not after everything I'd been through, not after everything I had built. The judge entered, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose. Her demeanor was professional, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made it clear she wasn't going to tolerate any nonsense from either side. Let's begin, she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. This is a case of wrongful termination and claims of unfair dismissal. I expect both sides to present their arguments clearly and concisely. Grayson's lawyer, a slick-looking man with dark, neatly combed hair, stood first. He gave a polite nod to the judge and turned to face us. Your Honor, we're here today because my client, Mr. Grayson, was wrongfully dismissed from his position as regional manager. He was terminated without proper cause or due process. We intend to show that the company's actions were unjustified and that my client's contributions were invaluable. We will be seeking full reinstatement and compensation for damages caused by his unfair treatment. I could feel Grayson's eyes on me, his gaze cold and calculating. He had that smug, self-satisfied look he always had when he thought he was winning. But I wasn't about to let him play the victim. David stood up next, calmly adjusting his glasses before addressing the judge. Your Honor, we strongly dispute the claims made by the plaintiff. Mr. Grayson was terminated for cause, based on his inability to meet the expectations of his position and his failure to effectively manage the company's resources. The decision was made after a thorough evaluation, and Mr. Grayson's performance did not align with the company's values or its long-term goals. We believe the termination was justified, and we will prove that Mr. Grayson's actions, both in his management style and his lack of results, were detrimental to the company. I sat back in my chair, my hands folded tightly in front of me. This was it, the moment of truth. David had prepared us for a long drawn-out battle, but I felt confident. The evidence was on our side, and I had no intention of letting Grayson twist the narrative in his favor. Grayson's lawyer tried to argue that my role in the company wasn't clearly defined, that my contribution to the team was vague and insignificant. They even brought up my salary, claiming that I was overpaid for my position. But that's when David dropped the bombshell. He stood up again, holding a stack of papers in his hand, and walked over to the judge. "Your Honor, we have the documentation to prove that my client's contributions to the company were not only significant but essential," David said, handing over the stack of papers. "Included in these documents are performance reviews from several key clients, internal reports, and communications that show Emma's direct involvement in the success of the company's major projects. It's clear that she was the glue holding everything together, and her termination was not only unwarranted, it was a mistake." The room fell silent as the judge reviewed the documents. Grayson's lawyer seemed rattled for the first time, and I could see the faintest flicker of doubt in his eyes. David wasn't done yet. "In addition to the documentation, we have a number of witnesses who will testify to Emma's value in the company. Several employees, including Monica, are prepared to speak to her role in the success of our major accounts and her impact on team morale." I could see the tension building in Grayson's camp. His lawyer tried to stand up, but the judge raised a hand to stop him. "I will review the evidence," the judge said, her voice authoritative. "We will reconvene tomorrow to continue." The gavel slammed down, signaling the end of the session, and we all stood up. As I gathered my things, I couldn't help but glance at Grayson. He was staring at me with that same icy stare, but this time it wasn't full of confidence. It was laced with doubt. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events of the day in my head, wondering if we had done enough to seal the deal. I wasn't used to feeling this way, unsettled, unsure, but I knew that this was bigger than just me. This wasn't about proving myself to Grayson or the company. It was about showing everyone that I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I was the engine. The next morning we returned to court, and the tension in the air was palpable. Grayson's team was clearly more defensive now, and I knew they were scrambling to regroup. The judge entered and called the session to order, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. We had done everything we could, and now it was out of our hands. The day went by slowly, but as the judge reviewed all the evidence, it became clear that Grayson's case was falling apart. His claims that he was unfairly terminated were weak, and the evidence of my contributions to the company was irrefutable. When the judge finally spoke, I held my breath. "I have reviewed all the evidence presented," she said, her voice steady. "It is clear that the actions taken by the company were based on a legitimate evaluation of Mr. Grayson's performance. His termination was not only justified but necessary. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the defendant, Ms. Emma Ward." The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. Part 16. The gavel's echo still reverberated in my mind as I sat there in the courtroom, processing the judge's ruling. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. We won. Grayson's face was a study in disbelief, his jaw clenched tight as he stood, motioning for his lawyers to gather their papers. His eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, and in that look, I saw the full depth of his rage. But there was also something else: defeat. It was the kind of defeat that came when someone realized they had lost everything in one fell swoop. He was finished. I could barely contain my satisfaction. But there was no time for triumph just yet. I had a company to rebuild, and this victory was just the first step in ensuring that Grayson would never be able to hurt us again. But I couldn't let my guard down just yet. I knew that someone like him wasn't going to walk away quietly. As the courtroom emptied, I made my way out with David, my thoughts still swirling. The legal battle was behind me, but the real work was just beginning. I couldn't help but wonder if Grayson had a backup plan. Was he going to try something else? Would he appeal? I shook my head, trying to push the doubt away. I couldn't afford to be distracted by that. I'd won, and I needed to focus on what came next. A week later, everything seemed to settle. The company had officially reinstated me and the team was stronger than ever. Word had spread about Grayson's failure to destroy me, and people were more motivated than ever to prove that we were a united front. The energy in the office was electric, and for the first time in months I felt like we had control again. Monica came by my office one afternoon, a big smile on her face. "So what's next, boss?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. I smiled back. "Next, we take this company to new heights." Grayson might have thought he could destroy everything I've worked for, but all he did was light a fire in me. Monica laughed, nodding. "I think everyone feels it. People are more excited than I've seen in a long time. And you, Emma, well, you're a legend." I laughed, shaking my head. "Let's not get carried away. But we have work to do. We're not just rebuilding, we're going to show everyone exactly what we're capable of." The following weeks were a whirlwind. I poured my energy into strengthening our operations, meeting with clients, and ensuring that the team was aligned with the new goals. The challenge was immense, but I was driven. Every time I thought about how close I had come to losing everything, it fueled me to push even harder. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to thrive. But as things started to stabilize, a part of me couldn't help but wonder, what happened to Grayson? I had expected him to put up more of a fight, but after the court ruling he seemed to vanish. There was no media frenzy, no attempt to discredit me further. The silence was almost eerie. Had he finally realized that he had no more power? Or was he waiting for the right moment to strike? Then one afternoon, as I was walking out of a meeting with one of our major partners, I received a call from David. "Emma," he said, his voice urgent, "you need to get to the office. Something's come up and it's big." I didn't hesitate. "Grayson." I could feel it in my gut. "What happened?" I asked as I rushed out of the building. "It's not Grayson exactly," David replied. "It's the investors. They've been talking to him. There's something off, Emma. You need to see this." I arrived at the office in record time, my heart pounding in my chest. David was already waiting for me in my office, his face grim. "Emma, it's serious. Grayson has managed to convince some of the investors to back him, even after everything that's happened. They're planning a hostile takeover. They're trying to reassert control over the company." I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't over. Grayson had never truly given up. "What do we do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising inside me. David took a deep breath. "We fight back. We take the fight to them. We need to rally our team, make it clear that we won't let this company fall into the wrong hands. This is our moment." I spent the next few days preparing. There was no way I was going to let Grayson or anyone else undermine the progress we'd made. I met with the remaining loyal investors, showed them the long-term plans for the company, and convinced them that I was the right person to lead. But the battle was far from over. Grayson might have been defeated in court, but he was far from done. He was out for revenge, and it was clear he wouldn't stop until he had destroyed everything I had built. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. Part 17. The next few days were a blur of meetings, late nights, and phone calls with my team. The looming threat of a hostile takeover by the investors working with Grayson was suffocating. It felt like a constant battle for control, but this time I wasn't alone. I had built a loyal team and they were ready to stand by me. I spent hours on the phone with Monica, hashing out every detail. We had to stay ahead of the game. We needed to secure our position within the company, both financially and operationally, and we needed to do it quickly. If we waited too long, Grayson's team would gain enough traction to overrun us. "Emma, we can't afford to wait any longer," Monica said one night as we talked through a list of action steps. "We need to make a statement. Something that will make them realize we're not just going to roll over." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city skyline through the window. He was right. This wasn't just about protecting the company anymore. It was about making sure everyone knew that I was the one in charge. "What if we approach the investors directly?" I suggested. "We offer them a proposal, something they can't ignore." Monica's voice was thoughtful. "You're thinking about a deal. Something to sweeten the pot and keep them from siding with Grayson?" "Exactly. I've learned a lot about what makes these investors tick. They want growth, stability, and proof that the company is moving in the right direction. We can give them that, better than Grayson ever could." The next day I set up a meeting with the major investors who were wavering in their support. David and I crafted a pitch that we hoped would be impossible to resist. We focused on our company's strengths: loyal clients, innovative operations, and a clear vision for the future. We knew that Grayson had no vision. He was reactive, trying to control everything with fear and intimidation. But I had something far more powerful: determination, experience, and a team that trusted me. We met with the investors in a sleek conference room downtown. I arrived early, feeling a sense of calm mixed with nerves. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of everything I had worked for. As the investors filtered in, I could feel the tension in the room. Grayson's influence was palpable, but I could see the cracks forming in their loyalty. They were already questioning his leadership, and I knew that if I made the right impression, I could turn this around. After a round of pleasantries, I stood up to present. I kept my voice steady even though my heart was racing. I've spent the past 7 years building this company from the ground up, I began, looking each of them in the eye. And over the past few months, we've come through some of the toughest challenges we've ever faced. But we've learned from each one. We're stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. I paused, letting my words sink in. Grayson's vision for this company is flawed, I continued. He doesn't understand the people who work here or the values we uphold. He's focused on short-term gains at the cost of long-term success. I am offering you something different. A plan that puts the company, the employees, and the clients first. And most importantly, a plan that guarantees stability and growth. I could feel the investors listening now, their skepticism slowly turning into curiosity. They hadn't heard this side of the story before. No one had ever spoken to them like this. We've already secured several new accounts that are projected to increase revenue by 30% in the next quarter, I added. We have the team, the strategy, and the determination to succeed. All we need is your support. There was a long silence after I finished speaking. The investors exchanged looks, their minds clearly working. I could see a few of them nodding, already sold on the idea. But I knew there was still one big hurdle to overcome: convincing them that Grayson was not the right person to lead. Finally, one of the investors, Richard Vaughn, who had been quiet throughout the presentation, spoke up. And what about Grayson? How do you propose we handle him? I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. Grayson is no longer a part of the company. He's not a leader, and he's certainly not someone who can take us to the next level. His actions have already cost us enough. The tension in the room deepened as the investors turned to each other, weighing the decision. I had said what needed to be said, but the next few moments would determine everything. Finally, Richard spoke again, this time with a sense of finality in his voice. All right, Emma. We're with you. We'll give you the support you need to take the company forward. Grayson's time is over. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. We had done it. The victory wasn't immediate. There were still hurdles to clear, but with the support of the investors, we managed to outmaneuver Grayson's allies and secure the future of the company. The hostile takeover was called off, and our plans for growth were set in motion. As for Grayson, his fall from grace was swift. The investors who had once backed him turned their backs, and his influence crumbled. Word spread about his mismanagement, and soon he was nothing more than a footnote in the company's history. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about proving that I wasn't just the person they had fired. I was the person who would rebuild, reimagine, and lead the company to new heights. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I truly had control over my future. Part 18. The months that followed felt like a blur of non-stop action. Rebuilding the company, maintaining a tight grip on our operations, and ensuring that no one faltered in their commitment to the vision I had set in motion. It was overwhelming, but it was also incredibly rewarding. Every day the momentum grew, and every milestone felt like a small victory. I spent more time with my team, listening to their ideas and making sure that the culture we had cultivated before Grayson's takeover was coming back in full force. There was a renewed sense of loyalty, camaraderie, and excitement that permeated the office. It was clear that we were no longer just surviving. We were thriving. As for Grayson, he faded into obscurity. The press that had once heralded him as a corporate genius now labeled him as a cautionary tale. His attempts to make a comeback were futile, as his reputation was permanently tarnished by his inability to deliver on the promises he had made. But even though Grayson was no longer a threat, the shadows of the battle we had fought lingered. There was still one final hurdle I had to face: the internal struggle to ensure that my position as leader was solidified. Trust had been broken before, and while the team had rallied behind me, I knew I had to prove that I was capable of leading this company to the future we all envisioned. One morning, I met with Monica for coffee at a nearby cafe. We were celebrating another major client signing a multi-year contract with us, and we couldn't help but smile at the progress we had made. You know, it still feels a little surreal sometimes, Monica said, taking a sip of her coffee. I remember when we were worried about losing everything and now we're on top. I smiled, nodding in agreement. It does feel surreal, doesn't it? But we've earned this. We've worked so hard and now it's paying off. Monica looked at me, her expression thoughtful. Emma, I know you've been under a lot of pressure, especially after everything that happened with Grayson. But you're not just the person who was fired anymore. You're the person who saved this company. You're the leader now. I felt a wave of gratitude toward her, but also a pang of uncertainty. I don't know if I'm ready to fully embrace that yet. I've always been more comfortable being the one behind the scenes, making things work without needing to be in the spotlight. Monica raised an eyebrow. You're the one who took down Grayson, the one who fought tooth and nail to keep this company alive. You've earned every bit of the spotlight, Emma. The team looks to you now. You are the leader. Her words hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I was the leader now, and it was time to own that role, to step into it fully and unapologetically. I couldn't afford to doubt myself anymore. Not when everything I had worked for was finally falling into place. That evening, I walked into the office, feeling a sense of clarity that I hadn't had in a long time. I had been so focused on surviving, on fighting against the forces that had tried to bring me down, that I had neglected to truly accept the success we had achieved. But now it was time to step into the future. I gathered the team for a meeting in the conference room, and as I looked around at the faces of those who had been with me through thick and thin, I knew that they were ready for the next chapter. I want to thank all of you for everything you've done to help rebuild this company, I began, my voice steady but filled with gratitude. This wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. We've come a long way since those dark days when we weren't sure if we'd make it. But we've made it. And now we're ready to move forward together. I paused, letting my words sink in. I could feel the energy in the room shift. People were engaged, focused, and determined. They were ready to take on the challenges ahead. Our goal isn't just to rebuild what we lost, I continued. It's to become the company we always knew we could be. The industry leader. The company that others look to for inspiration. The company that people want to work for. There was a collective nod around the room, and I could see the spark of enthusiasm in their eyes. This was it, the moment I had worked toward. The team was not just loyal to me, they believed in the vision I had set forth. And that belief would drive us to success. The next few years were a whirlwind of growth and innovation. We expanded into new markets, added more clients, and developed cutting-edge products and services. Our reputation as a company that put its people and clients first was unmatched. And as for Grayson, his attempts to rise from the ashes were futile. He was a cautionary tale now, an example of what happens when arrogance and ego outweigh true leadership. But the greatest victory wasn't the downfall of Grayson. It was the realization that I had become the leader I had always been meant to be. No longer the background figure, no longer the person who hid behind the scenes. I was the person who had brought this company back from the brink. I was the person who had faced the worst and come out on top. And with that knowledge, I moved forward with unwavering confidence, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Part 19. As the months turned into years, the company's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Our revenues were soaring, client satisfaction was through the roof, and most importantly, the culture had shifted from one of fear and uncertainty to one of empowerment and innovation. We were no longer just employees, we were partners in this journey. And every one of us had a stake in the company's success. But with success came new challenges. The market was becoming more competitive, and while we had established ourselves as industry leaders, there were always others waiting for an opportunity to knock us off our pedestal. I had to remain vigilant, constantly thinking 5 steps ahead. The corporate world had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. One evening, as I was going through reports and strategic plans for the upcoming quarter, my phone buzzed. It was Monica. "Hey Emma," she said, her voice carrying an undertone of urgency. "We need to talk. There's something you should know." I sat up straight, instantly sensing that something was off. What's going on? I just got wind of some rumors, she began. Some of the investors who had backed us initially are starting to pull back. They're not happy with the direction we're taking and they're hinting at selling their stakes. My heart sank. We had been riding high on momentum for so long that the thought of losing everything we'd worked for felt like a gut punch. Who? I asked, trying to steady my nerves. I'm still trying to confirm, but I'm hearing that Richard Vaughan and David Corbin are the ones leading the charge. They've been talking about wanting more aggressive growth, expansion, mergers, acquisitions. They think we're stagnating. I exhaled slowly, processing the information. This is a mistake. We're not stagnating, we're building something sustainable. We've always prioritized steady growth over reckless expansion. I know, Monica agreed. But they're hearing the same pitch from the competition. Anne Grayson's investors, remember them? They've been whispering about how much potential we've left untapped. I rubbed my temples, trying to think clearly. Grayson's old allies. The ones who had once believed in his vision for short-term profits over long-term sustainability. They were trying to worm their way back in. Get me a meeting with them, I said, my voice hardening with resolve. We're not giving up what we've built. Not now. Not ever. I agree, Dylan added. The team looks up to you, but they also need to see you trusting us with the bigger picture. It'll motivate them to do the same. Kira, always the practical one, spoke up as well. What's the first step? Where do you want us to start? I stopped pacing and looked at each of them. I want you to take on more of the day-to-day decisions. I'll still oversee everything, of course, but I need to step back from the operational grind. Chloe, you can take lead on the strategy, Dylan, focus on partnerships and business development, and Kira, you'll continue to manage our client relations and marketing. I trust you all to make the right decisions, and I'll be here for support when needed. There was a moment of silence as they processed the new roles. Then Chloe spoke up again. Emma, we've got this. We've always had your back and we're not about to let you down now. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had finally made the decision to let go, just a little, and it felt right. It was time for the next phase of growth, and I had a team that was ready to take it on. Over the next few months, I watched as my team flourished in their new roles. Chloe implemented a more aggressive growth strategy and the results were immediate. Dylan secured key partnerships that expanded our reach into new markets. Kira's creative campaigns brought in a wave of new clients, and our customer retention rates soared. As for me, I found myself focusing on the bigger picture. I wasn't involved in the nitty-gritty every day, but I was still guiding the company, steering it through the larger challenges and opportunities that came our way. I had learned the value of letting go, of trusting the people around me to take ownership of their responsibilities. The company continued to grow, but now it was a more balanced growth. I wasn't just the face of the company anymore. I was part of a team, a collective force of people who believed in the vision we had created together. But there was one thing I knew for sure. The past, the fire, the battles, the struggles, had forged me into the leader I had become. And nothing, not even the hardest days ahead, could take that away from me. Part 21. The wind had shifted. After so many years of battling, of fighting tooth and nail to keep the company on its feet, I could finally take a breath. The internal changes had worked. The new structure was in place, the culture had been reinforced, and the clients were happier than ever. Things were looking up, and yet I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting in the wings. It wasn't paranoia, it was intuition. The kind of instinct I had honed over years of running this company, knowing when to pivot, when to push, and when to pull back. The world around us was changing fast, and even though we had established ourselves as industry leaders, I knew we couldn't get comfortable. One evening, as I was leaving the office later than usual, my phone buzzed again. It was Monica. Hey Emma. You have a minute? Always, I replied, already sensing the urgency in her voice. I think something's brewing, she said. It's been quiet, but I've got a few sources telling me that some competitors are getting ready to launch a product that could undercut us. They're planning to move fast, really fast. And we may be too distracted by our internal changes to notice. I stopped in my tracks, my stomach tightening. I had anticipated the possibility of competition, but not like this. Who's behind this? I asked. Several of the old players, ones we thought had either fallen off or been bought out. There's been some quiet merger activity. And I'm hearing a few familiar names in the mix. I didn't need to ask for specifics. I knew who she meant. Grayson. The people who had supported him before, the ones who had once believed in the idea of taking shortcuts, of sacrificing long-term growth for immediate results. They hadn't gone away. They were just waiting for the right moment to strike. Thanks, Monica. I'll take it from here, I said, my mind already racing. I had to act quickly. I had no intention of letting someone else steal the momentum we had built. The next few days were a blur. I gathered my leadership team for an emergency meeting and laid out everything I knew. Chloe, Dylan, and Kira listened carefully, their expressions hardening as I explained the situation. We're going to hit this head on, I said once I'd finished explaining. I've been in this game long enough to know that no one stays on top forever unless they're willing to adapt faster than anyone else. If they think they can beat us to the punch, they've got another thing coming. We're going to take control of the narrative. Dylan, ever the optimist, leaned forward. What's the plan? We're not going to sit back and let them dictate the pace, I said, confidence building. We're going to accelerate our own product roadmap. We already have a few things in the pipeline that will blow them out of the water, but we're going to speed up the timeline. I want everyone on board. No delays, no excuses. Chloe nodded, her eyes sharp. We need to hit the market before they even have the chance to make a move. We've got the momentum, but now it's about execution. Exactly, I said. We're going to be first. And we're going to make it look effortless. Over the next few weeks, it felt like I was running a marathon at full speed. The team was in overdrive, pushing new ideas out faster than I'd ever thought possible. There were late nights, early mornings, and endless rounds of testing. But the one thing we had was the experience and the trust that had gotten us this far. We knew how to work together under pressure. Monica kept me updated on the competition and things were moving quickly. But no matter how fast they tried to move, we were always one step ahead. We'd already launched the first phase of our new product by the time the competition officially announced theirs. And the feedback? It was clear. Our clients preferred what we had to offer. Not just because it was more refined, but because it aligned with their needs, their values, and their long-term goals. Grayson's investors had underestimated us. They'd thought they could disrupt our market with a flashy, surface-level product. But they had forgotten one key detail. We knew our clients. We understood their pain points and how to address them. They didn't. As the weeks turned into months, the competition began to dwindle. Grayson's side project failed to gain traction. They had missed their window and they couldn't keep up with the pace we had set. It was a slow, painful collapse for them, one I could do little but watch from a distance. It wasn't about revenge anymore. That had been my initial drive, when I had been fired, dismissed without a second thought. But now, as I watched the market turn, I realized that it wasn't about getting back at Grayson or his investors. It was about proving something to myself, to my team, and to everyone who had believed in us when we were just getting started. We had built something real, something lasting, and that was more than enough. Part 22. It's funny how the hardest battles often happen when you least expect them. I'd spent so much time focusing on external threats, on Grayson, on the competition, on staying one step ahead, that I hadn't fully appreciated the strength of the foundation we'd built. The true power wasn't just in outpacing everyone else. It was in staying true to what made us different in the first place. The company was thriving, no doubt about it. We had expanded into new markets, doubled our revenue, and gained recognition as one of the industry's top innovators. We had even weathered the storm of internal challenges that came with scaling. But what I hadn't anticipated was that the real challenge wasn't the market or Grayson's failed comeback. It was the evolution of the company itself. I found myself at a crossroads. After so many years of scrapping for every inch of progress, I had to let go of something that had defined me for so long. Control. The company had grown beyond what I could manage on my own, and it was time to bring in more leadership to keep us moving forward. But handing over the reins to others meant confronting the fear of failure, of losing what I had built. I sat in my office one afternoon staring out the window. The city had never looked so different. I had spent so much time fighting to get here, and now I was trying to decide what here actually meant. Chloe, Dylan, and Kira had been my pillars through all of this. We'd built this from the ground up together. But now it was time to bring in fresh talent. To pass on the torch to a new generation of leaders who could take what we had started and push it even further. I picked up my phone and called each of them. One by one they came to my office. Time to take the next step, I said once they were all seated. Chloe was the first to speak. What are you thinking? I've been thinking about succession planning. We've built something incredible here and now it's time to bring in some new blood. We need someone who can take this company to the next level, and I want you all to help me find that person. Dylan leaned back in his chair. You're talking about stepping back. I nodded. It's time. The company needs a new direction. Someone who can see it from a fresh perspective, someone who can innovate and lead in a way that I can't anymore. And I want you guys to be part of the decision. You've earned that. Kira spoke next, her voice calm but resolute. We'll do whatever it takes. But we're not going anywhere. This is our company too. I smiled. I know. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The search for the new CEO wasn't easy. We interviewed dozens of candidates but none of them felt like the right fit. They had the qualifications, the experience, but they lacked the heart, the passion that had driven us to where we were today. Then one day we met her. Olivia Harris. She was sharp, charismatic, and had an impressive track record of scaling companies in the tech space. But what struck me the most was her approach to leadership. She wasn't just about results, she was about people. She believed in empowering teams, in fostering a culture of innovation and collaboration, and most importantly, she was deeply committed to the same values we had built this company on. The team and I knew almost instantly that she was the one. It wasn't just about finding someone who could run the company, it was about finding someone who would continue our mission, someone who could build on the foundation we had laid. A few months later, we officially announced Olivia as the new CEO of the company. And though it was a bittersweet moment for me, it was also a proud one. I had built something remarkable, something that would continue long after I was no longer in charge. I remained with the company as a mentor and strategic advisor, helping to guide Olivia through the transition. It was hard at first, letting go of that final piece of control, but it was also incredibly freeing. I had done what I set out to do. I had proved everyone wrong. I had taken back what was mine. And now I was watching a new chapter unfold, one that I knew would be even more successful than the one we had written together. As for Grayson, well, that's a story for another time. But I'd made my point. The company had survived, had thrived, and was now stronger than ever. And as I watched Olivia take the reins, I knew I had made the right decision. She was the future of this company and I was proud to have been part of its journey. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about building something that would last. A legacy, a vision, and a team that could carry it forward. The story was never about one person. It was about all of us. And with that I walked away. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.